production company. Not Amico Production Company, it was Stanland Oil and Gas is what it was called then. It was owned by Standard Oil of Indiana. And Standard Oil of Indiana also owned Midwest, the old Midwest Oil Company, which was a discoverer of Salt Creek Field back in the 20s. I went to work there at Midwest. I took a bus, got on a bus in Tulsa. I think my dad gave me 25 bucks or something like that. Got on the bus and drove to Denver. I arrived there at night, changing buses. And, I didn't drive, I rode.
Mm-hmm.
And we got on, middle of the night, got on the bus to Casper. And by dawn, we'd gone through Cheyenne. I don't remember going through Cheyenne at all. I remember when the sun came up, I was in the bus, and we were basically following the Platte River. I had no idea where the Platte River was. I had been up there before. I came back from Idaho. No, I had not. Yeah, I had. I had been up there before. I came back from Idaho with Gene Rowe and our trip. We came back through Casper and going through Douglas and on down to Cheyenne and Denver, coming home. But the Platte River, we drove by it for a while. Looked like a nice river. It's a pretty big river. And I was amazed by it all. We got up to.
What about it amazed you?
It was a good river. It was deeply indented. It wasn't like the Arkansas River. I'd seen mountain rivers before, but this was not a mountain river. It was going through the prairie, but it was still a big river. It was clear. And I don't know if it was early summer or late summer. I think it was probably early summer when I did this. And I arrived in Casper on a weekend, maybe Saturday or Sunday, I don't know. And the man met me there at the bus station. The guy's name was W.A. Van Hook. He was an assistant superintendent, assistant field superintendent of Salt Creek Field. Another older fellow was the titular field superintendent. But Van Hook, was supposed to be a tough guy, but he didn't seem too tough. He drove me up to Salt Creek, which is 42 miles north of Casper. He goes by what's the dome there? There was a big scandal in the 30s.
What was the scandal?
The scandal was about giving the government lease to some people, including Harry Sinclair, on the structure that is just south of the main Salt Creek field. Let's see, there was a Balanced Rock there that they named the structure for it. I think of Balanced Rock, but Balanced Rock is a word I got from Colorado Springs. There's a place there called Balanced Rock. But anyway, we drove into Salt Creek, and Salt Creek was an old field. There's a lot of standard rate fronts, wooden derricks, stuff like that going on there then. And he dropped me off at the, Van Hook dropped me off at the bunkhouse. It was a bachelor bunkhouse, mainly a rooming place, and people would take meals in the Midwest Cafe. Midwest was a company town. We had bunkhouse, and all the houses in there were owned by the company. They rented about a cheap process to employees. And next to the town was a place called Edgerton, which was a real town, independent town. And they had a little vice over there, V-I-C-E. And they had beer and stuff like that.
What did it feel like to leave Tulsa?
It's quite a bit different. I had left Tulsa taking trips before. I traveled with Gene Rowe and with my family. And I always wanted to get back. I remember vacation trips we'd taken when I was growing up to Yellowstone National Park and Rocky Mountain National Park and places like that with my family in Crete, Colorado. That was in the 30s. And I remembered those places, but then came the war, and just when I was getting old enough to really appreciate it and participate in things like that, fishing and things like that, the war came along, and there wasn't any long distance travel that much. The end of the Depression and into the war. So we didn't go there, and I didn't forget about it, but I always wanted to go back, so that's how I went back. I applied to Amico Production Company, or rather Stanland, and they accepted me. We had a friend there with Amico, Mr. Kelleher, who was in the Treasury Department. I don't know if that had anything to do with me getting hired on by Amico, but it was right after the war, and they were looking for engineers. So I guess I filled in. And I lived there in Midwest Wyoming for a little over a year. Another guy there, Bob Ryan, Robert Seaton Ryan, was the guy who went to TU, and he came up there at the same time. He's an older fellow, been in the war. And he got sunk off the carrier Independence, I think it was. But anyway, he had his carrier, that's one of the things I remember, is he'd been in quite a bit of the war. Guy from New Jersey, Catholic. We got off pretty good. He's quite a bit older than me, but now that I look back, I had so many people in college that were veterans, had been through the war, and here I was just a punk kid, hadn't been in any war, and I was constantly amazed that they treated me so nicely. They really did. And I'm still amazed by it. But maybe it was because I didn't give them cause to be PO'd at me.
Yeah.
But here we are back in Midwest Wyoming. Midwest was, it's arid around there. There's a big sheep herder anticline. You can go any place around and look right into the basin, and it's all hollowed out kind of. You can see rock formations on the side pointing around outside. It was a bowl, and the inside of the bowl was where the field was. It was a structure that came up and it got eroded, and we had a bowl there. Just like so many other old oil fields that were discovered during the early part of the 20th century. We had other Tulsa guys, Tom Hewer. He went to Marquette. He was a year behind me. His father worked for Amoco in Casper, Wyoming, which was 42 miles south of Midwest. And we would frequently go into town and Ryan and Tom and myself and maybe a couple of other guys would go into town and get a good meal from Mrs. Hewer. And sometimes on Thursday nights, we'd drive into Casper and go to the Henning Hotel for the smorgasbord dinner, which was a new thing to me, basically a buffet dinner, and we quickly learned to avoid the salads and get right to the meat and the expensive stuff. They had, I particularly liked the kippered herring that they had there. I always filled up on that. Then we'd sometimes go to the 114 Club, which was named after their address in Casper, which is right near the center of town, a couple doors over from the crossroads in the center of downtown. And they had live entertainment there, very mild. I look back, but it was a pianist and maybe stand-up comedian or something like that. Nothing raunchy, but plenty of stuff to drink.
Did you meet any girls?
We'd sometimes go there after or before having dinner at the Henning Hotel. Then we drive back to Casper about 3/4 of an hour. I didn't have a car, but Ryan did. Several of the other guys did.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to chip in all the time on the fuel. I hadn't had a car yet. And while there, I met my good friend Darwin Creek. He was my gang pusher.
You're a gang pusher?
A gang pusher, yeah.
What does that mean?
The labor structure there is you have a roustabout, which I was, and you have what are you doing there, honey?
I took a picture of you.
Huh?
I took a picture of you.
Oh, okay. I thought maybe you were making a cell phone call, and that was kind of insulting to me.
No, I took a picture of
Okay.
you to record this.
Let me see, where was I? Oh, the structure of the labor structure there. Roustabouts and roustabouts did several things. One of them we did connection work. That is, whenever there was a leak and a line and a flow line that went from a well over to the tank battery, we had to, if there was a leak, they'd call out the superintendent, call out the farm boss and tell him, and he would call into the headquarters of the company, and they'd tell us to go out to such and such a lease and pull it, or see the leak there and repair it. And we'd go out, roustabouts, myself and the other basic lowest level employees would dig a hole with shovels, dig it straight down, as narrow as we could, so we didn't take a great big hole and go like this, we just went straight down. Made it as narrow as we could, got in there, exposed where they found out where the leak was, and put a Skinner clamp on it. It's a clamp that goes over a piece of pipe, and it has a big rubber clamp that you put on it. Clamp down and tighten it up, and keeps it from leaking anymore. It doesn't repair the pipe, it just puts a patch over it until it leaks the next time. They have a lot of, like everywhere, they have a lot of corrosion. And the other thing we did, we worked on a pulling unit. The pulling unit is a truck that gets rigged up whenever the subsurface pump, which was about 3,000 feet below the ground, it's a pump down there, and it's run by rods that go up and down and makes the pump actuate, and just like a water well pump. And the oil comes out and goes into the lead line and goes over to the tank battery where it's separated from, and the gas is taken out of it.
It's been in a while.
And sometimes the pump goes haywire.
Need to get that.
They're okay, they're nice people.
I forgot it was
Sometimes the pump, it corrodes or has erosion from sand that comes up, and the pump, the valves in it don't work as well as they used to, so they have to pull the pump, and usually it's a matter of changing the valves in the pump, and then repair the pump and then run it back down. But sometimes we repaired the pump, but usually we'd replace the pump with another one that had been repaired in the pump shop back at the base camp, at Central Camp. And we run it back in and learn to use, main thing with that, we had to use sucker rod tongs. A sucker rod is a solid rod that goes up and down and actuates the pump down below, and sucks the liquid up and comes down, picks up some more. And that was the usual thing with it. Sometimes you had a hole in the tubing, so that there's a leak. And when you had a hole in the tubing, sometimes you the hole was up pretty high, so you ended up pulling a wet string of pipe, and this was a pain in the butt. You open it up, and each time you broke open the tubing, about 25 feet of oil or oil in the water would come out almost in your face, get you all wet. And a day of pulling the wet string was a day hard spent.
Mm-hmm.
And those were the main three things: the lead line repair, rod jobs, and tubing jobs.
So it was pretty heavy manual labor, right?
Well, so yeah, I was young. I didn't realize. Didn't seem like that to me.
Yeah. How tall were you?
About 6'2". But kind of skinny, 170 pounds, I guess. This is what I did most of the time. I did this all the time. We worked in Camp 8.
Mm-hmm.
And a camp had a camp superintendent, you know. I forget the guy's name that was the camp superintendent. I know the guy that run the man that run the pulling unit was Albert Million. He was an older fellow. He kind of liked me. Worked for him, and so often in the repairing the lead lines and stuff like that. I worked for a guy named Bud. Can't think of his name now. Bud Lewis. Bud Lewis. Haven't thought of that in many years. Well, that's what you're supposed to record.
Bud Lewis.
Bud Lewis, Albert Million, Bud Lewis. And on our cruise, Darwin Creek worked. He's a big guy. He had a twin brother named Darrell Creek. Darrell was an electrician. He worked in the field, and he got electrocuted. Got a hot wire and died. There's another fellow that got electrocuted that I know of, but he was in, a couple of years later, he's a bumper in a field in Utah, far eastern Utah, just a little bit west of Rangeley Field in Colorado that I worked at. He was an individualist. He ran the entire field himself. And he was a mountain man. He liked to climb mountains. He was whenever he had time off, he'd be back in the mountains somewhere, hiking or climbing. So I forget his name, but he died violently. He got electrocuted. He was working on a line. And stuck his hand in the wrong place, and then he died right there.
Grandpa?
Yep.
Did you... I know that you love being outdoors and fishing and hiking, but did you ever have any desire to go to a big city? Was that a thing that men from your town ever did? Like go to...
No, I didn't. Then or later.
At that point?
I didn't then, and I didn't later.
But what about your friends? Did anyone ever leave to go to New York or Chicago or
Well, Bob Ryan, for
San
instance,
Francisco?
he went to work. Was transferred to Tulsa and then to Chicago, I think it was, and then took a job with a bank in New York. New Jersey, in New York, not New Jersey. It's kind of as a petroleum engineer. Banks had a lot of engineering, a lot of oil and gas loans, and Bob was one of those guys that handled those. I didn't have any inclination to do that, although later on, when I was doing evaluations for Kipling and Wanamaker, I had to have a lot of contact with bankers, banking engineers. But that's down the line.
Okay.
Let's see, where was I?
Your friend got electrocuted.
Okay, yeah. Darrell Creek died that way, and the guy that had the field and near Vernal, Utah. It wasn't the Vernal field. I forget the name of it. It might come back to me sometime. If I can, I'll write you and tell you about it.
I'm gonna have homework for you.
Huh?
I have homework for you.
Well, I know I have a lot of homework too. You want a timeline, right?
Mm-hmm.
With names
Mm-hmm.
and locations,
Dates.
section, township, and ranges, and
Mm-hmm.
lat longs. Well, you'll get that in due course.
Okay.
But we'll have to continue in this line. Where are we now on our time limit on the battery?
Battery's good. We're good. Keep talking.
And we're still in Rangeley.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we had, in Rangeley, we had a lot of, oh yeah, we had another old boy there. A guy my age, or maybe a year younger, older. He was a business major, and he'd worked in the office. Bob. I can't think of his name right now, but he got, we all ate dinner, ate our meals at the Midwest Cafe. And the family that run it was, I forget their name now, but the father in this family was a farm boss over in Camp 6, I think it was. General Superintendent in Camp 6. And he had a good-looking daughter that worked in the Midwest Cafe. And Bob got enamored with her and married her while she was still in high school.
Uh-oh.
That worked okay. But later on, Bob moved to Tulsa,
Okay.
and he started a son here that had a restaurant, high-scale restaurant. I'll think of his name if I think about it long enough. Bob, I'll think of it maybe. At least the next time I'll think of it.
So how long were you out there for? How many years?
Oh, just a year and a half.
And then what happened?
Well, they put me, after I'd been in the roustabout, and they put me in the warehouse.
Inside?
Handling hardware there. See, when they're out doing a pipeline, people would have to come in to get materials, like short pieces of pipe, or elbows, or tees, or little. These are all trade names for types of equipment that they had to get, and they had to fill out the forms and make sure we had correct inventory and had spares left. We had equipment to take care of all the equipment that was needed that got worn out. I worked there for, well, maybe 3 months. And during that same time, I bought my first rifle. I bought a Marlin Model 99, I think it was. No, Model 93. This was a caliber 25-36. It would shoot a 25-35 cartridge. It's a carbine. It has lever loaded. I bought it for $100 from Darwin Creek, which is the guy I worked with us at Camp 8. And I'm kind of proud of it, and I was showing it around. I showed Eddie Watkins, the guy that worked in the machine shop. We had a machine shop there that made machinery that we needed that wasn't bought on an ordinary basis. And I asked Eddie about it, and Eddie was, there's a whole lot of people up there that shot guns, and they were real good.
Okay, we're back in action.
If you got the crowbar business.
Repeat the last sentence.
Well, I showed my Marlin to Eddie Watkins. He was a machinist, and he said, make a good crowbar. Which really put me down.
What do you mean by that? It was a bad gun?
It's not a rifle, it's just a hunk of metal.
Okay.
We had another old boy named Peg. He had a peg leg. He was a pumper in the field. And he got around very well with that peg leg. He had a Jeep, and he got in and out of his Jeep real quick. Eddie Watkins, Peg. One time I went fishing, Bud Lewis, one of the gang pushers, invited me to go fishing with him on a Saturday up at, he had somebody else he took up there too. That was north, and drove north out of town and on the highway and went up to forget the name of the little town. I mentioned it earlier where we went to went up the middle fork of the Powder River and went north to the Red Fork of the Powder River. And that was my first fishing up there in Wyoming. And caught quite a few fish.
Who taught you how to fish?
Hmm?
Who taught you how to fish?
Well, my dad and my brother, and Field and Stream magazine, and Sports and Field magazine.
Okay.
I picked up all this stuff I read, and didn't have any real coach, but I learned things and learned how to do stuff, especially on equipment. Didn't have any money, you had to learn how to do things yourself. Of course, there wasn't very much technical stuff available then. Let me see, that takes up the Red Fork of the Powder River, right?
Mm-hmm. What comes next?
Later on, we went to Middle Fork of the Powder River, which goes the same way, but instead of, once you get into the, from KC to town we stopped at. Once you get to KC, you turn west onto County Road and go into what's called Robber's Roost, I think the name of it was. And you go north and went into Red Fork and went south, went into Middle Fork of the Powder River, and there was Outlaw Canyon there. It was named after some outlaws that holed up in the general area back in the 1900s, 1800s. But we had good fishing in the Middle Fork of the Outlaw Canyon. I remember one summer, I'd been doing things with Darwin Creek after I bought that gun from him.
The hunk of metal?
Hmm?
The hunk of metal?
The House of Metal?
Hunk of metal.
Oh, no, yeah, make a good crowbar. That one.
Yeah.
Still had it. Later on, I gave it to his wife to give to his husband on his birthday.
Okay.
I gave it back to him. I thought it was an old family heirloom. Actually, he'd sold it, didn't cash or something.
Okay.
I realized this finally. I gave it to Liz.
That was nice of you.
Yeah, what? He lived in Pinedale, Wyoming. But I went back to Midwest in October of that year. At the end of elk season, Darwin and Darrell had gone elk hunting, and I was supposed to come up, drive Darwin's green Chevy pickup truck, an old one, up to their cabin, which I did. But on the way up, I stopped at KC and got a cup of coffee. This is late in the afternoon after I got off work. Got a cup of coffee to get the woken up good, and came out and jumped in the pickup and drove off. And I was just getting out of town when I looked around the back of my pickup and I saw a big elk laying in the back of it. A bull elk with nice horns on it. So I knew that was not my car. So I went back to the cafe, parked the green pickup, and got into the green pickup right next to it and drove away. And nobody ever knew that guy's car elk had been stolen. I'm the only one that knows that tale. So I was not thrown in jail.
That's good.
Anyway, we didn't catch much fish. We caught a few, but coming out, I left the creel full of fish. I stopped to go to the bathroom and didn't pick up the creel. And next year, Darwin brought the creel back to me. The fish had all rotted. But anyway, he found it next year. Where are we?
We're in Wyoming. What brought your time there to a close?
I'm Seagram.
What brought your time in Wyoming to a closure?
Well, I got the word that I was supposed to go down to Rangeley, Colorado, and go to work as an engineer, a junior engineer down there.
Mm-hmm.
And preparation for that was still in the summertime. After 1 year, and there's a guy there from Cutbank, Montana, that was working on a summer job. He was a student in Montana, or some engineering school somewhere, and he got a job working in the summer down there. Cutbank was an oil town in northern Montana near the border that had very cold, a reputation of being a very cold place. And he had a 38 Buick coupe that he sold me for $100, or maybe $105.
Wow.
So that was my car, and I took this car and I drove down to Rangeley, Colorado. I remember I arrived at night there, and you could see the glow of the gas flare from the gas plant near Rangeley, at least from 80 miles away. And I kept driving and driving and driving west and on the highway, and finally I came on town, and there was a great big flare by the gas plant. And I came into town, and I forget who met me or who I went to see. I forgot what happened then, but again I stayed in another bunkhouse in Rangeley. It was not a company town, it was a company camp. See, Amoco or Pan American by that time had a camp, which was on the east side of town, west side of town. Texas Company had a camp which was in the central part of the field.
Mm-hmm.
California Company, which was the largest producer there, had a camp near the gas plant. And a company called Sharpless, Sharples, which had maybe 5 or 10% of the field. They had a camp. It was outside of the town. They had amenities in town, mainly restaurants and a couple filling stations and grocery stores and stuff like that. All of them along the main highway there. The field, the camp was right on the edge on the south end of the south edge of the field, and it was made access to the basin south of there. That's not too far from where there's been a whole lot of development going on in the last 10 years with tight gas and big fracking and stuff like that. Can't think of the basin name right now, the location name. But while I was there in Rangeley, I met friends there, the engineers in camp and stuff like that. Tom, my brother Tom, came back from Korea after fighting the war there.
How long was he there for?
Where, in Korea?
Mm-hmm.
I think a year or so, I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'd like to get numbers on that. And my brother Dick was with him. They were going deer hunting. They came into town, and together we went over into Utah, and then drove back into Colorado on the west side of the Green River in Colorado. Place near Diamond Mountain and Wild Mountain was the name of some of the locations. We hunted deer there for a day. It was very cold. We had a hard time getting up on this plateau that was fairly high up with a lot of snow. And we decided to leave there, so we did. And came back to Rangeley. Didn't get any game up there, didn't even see any game. Came back to Rangeley, and they hunted south of Rangeley up towards Texas Mountain, which is not terribly far from Douglas Pass and Baxter Pass. And Top shot a pretty big 3 or 4 point deer, mule deer. And he brought it back to Tulsa. He had it mounted, the head mounted at the town of Texas Creek, near the Wet Mountains, near the Arkansas River in Colorado. And later on, we kept that at the cabin at Tulsa Ozark Club, and when folks sold the cabin, which was not too long later, they put it down in the lodge at the Tulsa Ozark Club. And later on, they retired that and put somebody put a head of a white-tailed deer, I don't know where it came from. But I resurrected that thing and brought it home. And just recently, And after these 40 or 50 years, however long it was, the mount had deteriorated, so I cut the head off, but kept the horns, which is the basis of it. And Fred, when he was home here for Carolyn's wedding, he did the necessary work to get that mounted back up, so it's sitting in my den now at the house. Okay, where are we now?
Rangeley.
While I was in Rangeley, we'd frequently drive up to Aspen, Colorado, and go skiing there.
Mm-hmm.
That was on Sundays. We'd drive there and go skiing and come back.
How long of a drive was it?
Oh, about 3 hours.
It's a long drive for one day of skiing.
Well, that's big country. We drove that to go get a beer. Really, really.
My gosh. You're dedicated to your beer drinking.
Huh?
You were dedicated to your beer drinking.
Well, no, we had to be dedicated to something. Let me see, I don't want to leave Rangeley, Colorado now yet, but can we?
How long were you there for?
Oh, I think about almost 2 years.
Okay. I think now
Again, I gotta get the, somehow go back and get numbers.
Okay. Let's stop here.
Okay. Whew. Okay, I want $200.
Grandpa?
Near the town of Rangeley, it's an old sheep herder anticline.
Mm-hmm. In Rangeley?
It's long, yeah, on the, it was called, see, the area was called, oh, what's the Western Crow, Raven Park. It was a big place with outcroppings all the way around. A park in the mountains is a place with it's quite open, with a whole lot of surrounding higher country.
Mm-hmm.
And that was Raven Park. And it was a field discovered in 1932 by a couple of fellows that were driving through and saw the anticline and decided to drill a well there, and they did. But there was some production before that, shale, Mancos Shale. Mancos Shale had produced several million barrels of oil, green oil, better than the oil that the big oil discovered later. We're talking about shale oil now, and this field had was $11 million shale oil coming from fractures in the Mancos Shale. Anyway, I arrived at night, driving my '38 Buick coupe, and I could see the field from a long ways off due to the reflections of light from the flare of oil that was being being vented, and gas that was being vented because there wasn't any market for it. They'd processed the gas and taken out what liquid products they could from it, and there was not much of a market for those products either. Rangeley was pretty isolated. There wasn't any railroads near there at all. There wasn't any railroads all the way over to Vernal, Utah. That's about 55 miles west. The nearest railroad was probably up in around Rifle, Colorado, probably, or else up on the Union Pacific, about 50, 60, 70 miles north. Not so much for the railroads, I guess. I found my way to the camp where I was supposed to report in. There wasn't anybody there. I found somebody that was, I don't know what I did the first night, if I stayed in a motel or what the heck. I got in there and called somebody. They gave me a phone number for it. And I got established at the bunkhouse that the bachelors had. Mostly the bachelors are guys like me. There are several young engineers, unmarried engineers, and accountants, and some other roustabouts of bachelors.
Roustabouts?
Hmm?
What'd you call them?
Bachelors?
But did you say roustabout?
Roustabouts, yeah.
What does that mean?
They're a basic laborer in in a production oil field.
Oh, okay.
I had been a roustabout in Salt Creek before that,
Mhm.
but now I was an engineer. And I had my room there. We had the shower and the bathroom separate. There was a couple of other engineers and the one other engineer that lived in the bunkhouse, an accountant, and let me see. I think there was a summer guy that was there. Guy was college guy that were working up there for the summertime.
Mhm.
At Rangeley, the work I did was I tried to determine what wells needed to be worked on, what wells needed to be fractured, given a stimulation treatment, or pulled. And did that as well as I could. That wasn't really, I also did some reserves on some of the wells. The production there was from the Weber Sand. It's Pennsylvania. Same as the sand that's in the Maroon Bells down there near Aspen.
Mhm.
And the main thrills there were hunting and find a place to have a beer. We'd have beers in town, a couple of bars there. Sometimes we'd go over to Vernal, Utah, places around there. And we'd often go out driving for later on in the fall, especially in the fall, hunting in the country south of town. And it was in an area that has now been proven highly productive by, well, let me see, Williams Oil, Williams Engineering has a whole lot of gas production in Piceance Basin, which is as a high ground to the southeast of Rangeley. We sometimes drove over to the Grand Junction area. One time I drove over to Moab, Utah, just going exploring. Later on, just recently, I found that my grandson Andrew, that was his favorite place to go on the weekend when he was going to Colorado Mines. He'd go over there and bicycle in the open country and climb around there. He was really enthusiastic about the area around Moab.
And what company were you working for?
I was working for Stanley Oil and Gas Company.
Stanley. Okay.
That was a production department of Standard Oil Company of Indiana.
And so,
In the wintertime, we would drive up the Aspen ski area. It was about 160 miles, about a 3-hour drive. Just drive up there on a Sunday afternoon. And we did that several times. I went my skiing for my first few times there, actually.
what were your skis made out of?
Hmm?
What were your skis made out of?
They're wood skis. I had a Spalding wood ski. It had, the edges were metal, but they weren't interlocking edges. Kind of a cheap ski, but it was better than I knew how to handle it anyway at the time. Uh, there were some girls in the community, a couple of nurses that the company had worked for them. We didn't have really much for full-time doctors there. We had well, it wasn't a hospital, but it was a doctor's office, several doctors and several nurses. I remember one little nurse she was a single nurse, she had an MG, which was a nice little car at the time. One time I found out I got up and all of a sudden I was sick. And it turned out I had the flu. I caught the flu. You know, I was living in the bunkhouse and wasn't anybody to treat you. I didn't have any parents there anymore. So I just toughed it out. And went up to get some food from the Anchor Lounge, which also served 3 meals. And I just killed time until I felt better. I didn't go to bed all the time, but I was, just in my early 20s, so I stayed active, but I didn't work. I was just flat unable to do anything productive. And I got over it and went back to work and nothing happened.
How long were you in Stanley for? How many years?
I was there about a year and a half, I think. I don't know that, I haven't gone back and dug out the dates on all this stuff. So, 4th of July, we had a rodeo there. It was a local produced rodeo. There's cowboys around there, a lot of them, and they were real cowboys. The range was pretty open. One of the big events on the rodeo was a wild horse race. Now, south of town, about 30 miles out not in the woods, in the prairie, it's scrub country. About 40 miles, there's a herd of wild horses, and they still have a herd of wild horses there. And the cowboys would go out and trap about 20 of these horses for the rodeo and bring them in trucks. And they'd have a wild horse race, and this consisted of taking these horses and putting them out in the arena without any trappings on them, without any harness or anything on them. And it was conducted this way: that the cowboys in teams of 2 would go out and rope these horses, saddle them. One of the guys would mount the horses, and by roping them, they'd rope them, and then they'd get them in hand and put their ears, clamp down on their ears with their teeth, and kind of drag them and subdue them that way and keep them under control while the other cowboy saddled the horse. And the rider would get on, and the winner was determined by, they had, across the arena, they had a wire that was strung from it, and the prize award, which is a bag of cash, was out there, and the winner was the guy that could get up there on his horse, direct his horse there, and pick up the winnings, the earnings. It was a pretty wild thing, as you might imagine, people getting kicked in the head and stuff like that. Never seen or heard anything like it in the world since then. It was probably eliminated because of inhumanity to the critters, not the cowboys. Most of them didn't have any teeth anyway.
What was your favorite thing about Rangeley?
Well, the country, I guess. We'd take trips all over. We'd go way back in the country south of town, up towards Douglas Pass, and sometimes over Douglas Pass. It's a mid-level pass, about 8,500 feet.
Mm.
Up Douglas Creek. In fact, we'd ski sometimes, go up Douglas Creek in the winter and ski down a pipeline right away that came over as well as we could. I had a picture somewhere in my collection of pictures of me sitting down on the ski. It's called a ski run. It was just open snow going down a kind of a gully, along 2 mile gully, something like that. But anyway, that was as close as we had to skiing. And like I said before, other times we'd drive all the way over to Aspen.
Did you make good friends?
Oh yeah, I had some good friends there. One of them, I forget his name now, he had a degree in mining engineering from where, I don't know, Ted Ralph. Ted Ralph was his name. Later on, when I was drafted in the Army and went over to Korea, our troop ship stopped at Honolulu, and all the guys on the troop ship got a leave for half a day and got off the boat there, and I went up and gave Ted Ralph a call, and he picked me up and he took me all over showed me all around the island, on the south end of it anyway.
Cool. Was it beautiful?
Oh yeah, I'd never seen anything like that before. But that's later on. Mm-hmm. But that connections, you have to have good friends there. Yeah, we had a lot of good friends. Mm-hmm. Frequently, we'd have guys up there in the summertime. Some of them came from Tulsa. We see Bob and Bill. Oh, a couple of brothers, Catholic kids. I can't think of the names now, but that later, both of them went to Colorado Mines, I think, and got college degrees there.
So when did you leave Rangeley?
Leave. Well, after my time was up there, I was told to come drive back to Casper and work in Casper at the district office. for Amoco as a reservoir engineer. So I picked up and drove the 38 Buick. Well, by that time also, I ended up with 2 cars. Sometimes I drive home a time or two from Rangeley on my vacation, and it was a long old drive. I remember one time I stopped in Arapahoe Basin on Berthoud Pass, and no, was it Berthoud? Yeah. No, not Berthoud. Yeah. Oh, no, not Berthoud Pass. I forget the name of it. I stopped there and went skiing at Arapahoe Basin. Then I don't know how many times I drove home from there, once or twice, I guess. Later on in the fall, one of the falls I was there, my brother Tom had just got back from Korea, and he and Dick, with a car that Tom had, an old green Chevy as I recall, they drove up to see me, and Tom was going to go deer hunting. We, on the weekend, we drove over to Vernal, and then went up north of Vernal and east, and went up to on top of the plateau there, and we hunted deer. It was cold and snowy, and we had to use chains to get up this big, about 2,000 feet of road that went up to get into the mountains. Dick and I did a lot of pushing, and Tom was doing the driving. We had to take off. We had to demud the chain. We're going over a lot of real sticky shale on the road up there. So we'd accumulate clay underneath in the tires and underneath the car, and have to stop it and scrape that stuff off before we could get it to moving again. Finally got up at night and set up camp. We had a cheap tent of some sort. I forget much about it. Didn't do any good, didn't even see any deer up there. Came down after one night or 2 nights, we decided that wasn't going to be productive. We're up in an area in Colorado that's west of the Green River. The White River that flowed through Rangeley flows into the Green River a little bit downstream from Rangeley. Green River comes in from Wyoming.
Mm-hmm.
And there's an area that had a 2 deer limit, and had a long season because it never got hunted and it was overpopulated with deer, but we didn't see the darn deer they were talking about. Anyway, we came back to Rangeley, and the weather eased up quite a bit, and I went back to work, and Tom and Dick went out hunting the next day, and they came in that night with a 4-point deer. Tom brought back. He had it mounted in a place near I'm trying to think of the town, little town that is only on some airplane charts, I think. In Colorado, near the the, a famous bridge over the Arkansas River. I forget the name of it now. I could add that later. But Tom had it mounted, and he brought that back and put the deer head up in the cabin in Spavinaw. It's found on Spavinaw Creek. And stayed there till we got rid of the, well, we stayed there even after, no, my dad sold the cabin,